You're listening to Beyond Orders, a podcast about military spouses who are done shrinking themselves to fit someone else's story. Hosted by Michelle Penzak, CEO of Squared Away.
Thank you for listening to Beyond Orders. I'm Michelle Penzak, and I'm so glad you're here. Today's guest is someone whose work has changed the landscape for military families, Elizabeth Libby Jamison. Libby is an attorney and consultant with nearly 20 years of experience in law, policy, and advocacy. She served at the highest levels of government, including as senior advisor to Joining Forces, Dr. Joe Biden's initiative supporting military and veteran families, caregivers, and survivors. She's held counsel roles at the Department of Veteran Affairs and the Democratic National Committee, and she led the Military Spouse JD Network, driving licensing accommodations across more than 40 jurisdictions. Her impact hasn't gone unnoticed. She was named Military.com's 2019 Spouse Changemaker of the Year and earned a spot on the 2023 Mighty 25. Libby's career is proof that one person can create real change, and today we're going to talk about how she's done it, what drives her, and what's next. So let's get into it. Libby, I'm so glad to have you join us.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited for this conversation.
I know. I was just saying before we started recording that you're our very first non-squared away person. And
no pressure.
I love that. I love that. It's us, just advocating for our network. So why military spouses? What created that spark for you?
Yeah, I think as so many of us, our personal and our professional are intertwined, right? In really deep ways. And for me, I grew up as a Navy brat. You would think that meant I knew what I was getting into, but I didn't learn my lesson. I married into the Navy. I married a naval aviator. I don't want to say how long ago, but I will be dating myself. But we got married in 2003.
Naval aviators are a different breed. My husband is a V-22 pilot, and they are a whole different brand of military, I feel like.
Yeah, it is naval aviation is a very niche community. I was Squared Away and is a very Navy term, I feel like. So, I can appreciate that. But we got married as so many military spouses do. I got married right after college because we met in ROTC. I had quickly decided Navy life was actually not for me, but fell in love in the meantime. And, he was off at flight school. I was still in Seattle. So, of course, you're in this rush to get married. And we got married maybe 6 months after I graduated, so pretty quickly. And at that time, I had my bachelor's degree, and I was like, I'm ready to conquer the world. And, we landed in San Diego, and I quickly realized I had no network, personal or professional at that point. Knew some folks through the squadron, but that was really it. And I was applying for everything. At one point, I even applied to be a private investigator. And I remember being in this kind of shady guy's office, and he wanted me to do a urine sample on the spot, not to be TMI. But I just was like, what is my life come to? Like, what is happening
here? What got me on this path?
Yeah. And so none of that worked out. And again, I think as a lot of spouses, we're like, okay, I'm going to go back to school, right? When you can't figure out your professional path, let's add some more education. That's why military spouses are more highly educated than our peers, because a lot of times we're trying to fill that gap on the resume, maybe kill some time during a deployment. And I had thought about going to law school before. My mom, growing up, had always said I would make a great lawyer because of my arguing skills, which I don't know if that was a compliment.
You know what? I'm going to choose to say it was a compliment because my mom used to tell me the exact same thing. She was like, you have a response to everything, and you always try and sell ice to an Eskimo, basically. And I'm like, you know what? Compliment. It's okay.
Yeah, we'll go with compliment. And so I quickly enrolled in school in San Diego and ended up doing it in 2.5 years instead of three, because again, he's like off flying and training and starting his career, and I had a lot of time on my hands. And so took classes in the summer, got through, and then realized like, well, now I'm in the same situation. I have a little bit more of a network, but what am I going to do? And was able to find a job and get started. And we were lucky enough, to stay in San Diego at least long enough for me to go to law school in one place. I didn't end up having to transfer. I was able to get my first job. And then I actually went out on my own. I was feeling so confident, like, I'm going to hang my own shingle out. I'm going to do my own thing. I've got this figured out. And then, of course, we got orders to Florida.
Uh-huh.
So, completely opposite side of the country. Again, I don't know anybody in Florida. And that is when I realized I'm going to have to take a bar exam every time we PCS. And that sounds like a nightmare, right?
Oh
And
my gosh.
it's that way for so many professions. And fortunately, there's been a lot of progress since this all happened in 2012, but it's still not great. But at that point, like, here I am going to have to shell out like $1,000 for an exam. They're only offered twice a year. By the time I pay, hopefully pass, hopefully, not a guarantee. How do I even know somebody's going to hire me? And then we're going to be off again. At that point, the squadron was potentially going to move to Virginia. You know how it's like,
Mm-hmm.
maybe we're not even going to be there 2 or 3 years. And so in my head, I think I had thought like there's lawyers everywhere, right? Like
Right.
being a lawyer is going to be a great job.
It's the
And a
safe
lot of
job.
spouses, right? I think a lot of spouses think that teaching, nursing, a lot of these jobs that do exist everywhere, but that licensing piece, aside from just having to try and build a new network and find that new job, the licensing piece can be a real toughie to overcome. I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir
Oh
here.
no, it's so funny because before I ever started Squared Away, my mom's a nurse, my mother-in-law's a nurse, like I am completely surrounded. My sister is a nurse, and they were all like, "Well, become a nurse. It's the safe thing." And I'm like, "I don't like people that much. I'm sorry. No." And I got into it, and then military spouses who were nurses were telling me I have to take the NCLEX pretty much every time we move. And
Yeah.
that's a one and done type thing for most people, which I'm sure you know, passing the bar is pretty much the same thing. And they were just like, what's the point? Because I'm going to be low woman on the totem pole at my next place.
Right.
If I get a job doing
Right.
something I like and I don't have really, really crappy hours, so why go with the safe job? And the safe jobs, come to find out, are actually not that safe, funny enough.
Right. And there's so much hidden expense too. I mean, already in PCSing, I think there's a lot of expenses that yes, there are some reimbursements and some support, but we all know there's so many hidden expenses that we don't recover. And for a long time, the licensing fees were a part of that. And now portions of that can be reimbursed, which is a fantastic improvement that's happened in the past decade, as long as it continues to be funded, which is important. But it's still a process. You still have to send everything in to the service, get them
Mhm.
to reimburse. They reimburse the service member, not the spouse, which is interesting. But the fees can be monumental,
Oh yeah.
um, to get relicensed. And then, like I said, then after we went to Florida, we went to Rhode Island, to Virginia, back to San Diego, back to DC. And so that was what, to your question, why advocate? How did I get involved with supporting military families? It was because I had those hurdles in my own life. And I thought, this is messed up. And who better to change it than a bunch of military spouse attorneys, right?
Heck
Um,
yeah.
And so fortunately, I found Military Spouse JD Network back then, which was just starting. I think it had started in 2012 or 13. And so it had been around a couple years by the time I got involved. I started just volunteering, doing social media for them. I ended up being blocked by the California State Bar on Twitter at one point because I was tweeting them so much about how they needed to do better for military
I
families.
love it. I love it. Hey, if somebody's blocking you, you're saying something important.
I was like, do I get my dues refunded if I'm blocked? I mean, what's going on here? But that was really incredible. And we started with, one or two states where we said, this is not right. We have these military spouses who have proven that they're competent, they've proven that they're capable. The only reason that they are struggling is these licensing barriers because a lot of states do allow reciprocity, but
Mm-hmm.
only after you've practiced maybe 3 years, 5 years, and you have to have been in practice. Some of the rules say continuously, and we all know how hard that is. Maybe you took a break because you had a kid, maybe there was a deployment, a PCS, and so the rules just did not, the rules are very outdated and not modern, which is, I think, not a surprise to any of us, but they just didn't reflect the reality for military spouses, for a lot of working women. And so I think we were able to make really great progress and go in there and say, carve out these rules for military spouses, but also get them to start to think about how to modernize the rules more generally.
Mm-hmm.
In this day and age where people are working remotely, maybe they're not in the state where, I am not in California and Washington right now, but I am licensed there and that's where I practice. And so there's just a lot of outdated pieces, but we were able to, go state by state. And some of it was literally going to these conferences where the bar presidents would come together, tracking them down in the room. Some of them were not happy to see us coming. But say, like, you have X number of military families in your state. We think there's probably this many attorneys. Even and some of them would say, why are we going to do this? It's one or two. You say it's one or two this year, and it's one or two the next year, and the next year, and the next year. And you already make exceptions for in-house attorneys, for pro bono attorneys. It's not like these exceptions
Mm-hmm.
don't exist. So let us help you. We have our little, we had like a model rule with all of the language. We can, deliver it to you on a platter. And some rules went into effect with things we didn't like supervision, which is not great because then you have to find a lawyer again who knows somebody when they move to a state and say, please hire me. And by the way, you have to sign off on a piece of paper accepting responsibility for me.
Which, I mean, it's hard enough to get an emergency contact for your kid in preschool when you're in a brand new state. How do you have the time, the effort, and the energy to sit there and contact an attorney and be like, hey, will you look over my shoulder, essentially, and make sure I don't do anything wrong? And that's not fair just because
And
you
who's
have
going
a
to hire?
spouse in
Like,
the
we all know the reality. We know the reality of discrimination that happens a lot of
Mm-hmm.
times when you say you are a military spouse. Maybe they're not saying it to your face about that's not why they're hiring you. But if you're a military spouse attorney and you walk in and you need this boss to sign off on your pleadings or do anything extra compared to another attorney that has the same experience, like why are they going to go out of their way to hire you? And so those are really unfortunate. The good news is recently Congress passed an update to the SCRA, the Service Member Civil Relief Act. Originally, it excluded attorneys, but it made great progress for everybody else, saying that the states did have to offer, licensing reciprocity essentially to service members and spouses who are moving because of orders. And it recently was updated to include attorneys. So now those states who are requiring supervision are arguably not in compliance with federal law. And Virginia has recently updated their rule to remove supervision. So it's slow, it's frustrating work, but back to the point of the bar presidents asking, why would we do this? Like, we've now seen over a decade and how this makes a difference in, it's one family here and one family here and one family here, and that adds up over time. And I think the states start to see how beneficial these rules are, um, and that they actually aren't that heavy of a lift.
Yep,
And so
exactly.
I'm excited to see the progress continue.
No, that's incredible. We got married in 2013, and it was very much a outdated mindset across the entire board. And I can't imagine, having a license that you've quite frankly busted your ass for, because getting a law degree and then passing the bar is no easy feat by any stretch of the imagination. And then you are blocked at every turn. That's just, I'm sorry, but that just pisses me off as a military spouse, because it's
Yeah.
not fair. And so many people, and I know you've heard it, well, you knew what you were getting into. No,
Mm,
I
I hate
actually
that.
didn't. I had no idea that military spouses were, number one, so discriminated against in a professional capacity, and the fact that we have to fight for everything. And a lot of times people are hiding the fact that they're a military spouse when you should be waving a flag around saying, I am so proud to be a military spouse and a part of this community. And that just lights a fire under everybody that I know that has this conversation. So
Yeah.
that
And
insanity.
I mean, that's a good segue into, you know, we bounced around for a while and I was doing different things. I went out on my own again. I was working remotely, which this was like 2013, 14, 15, was still, I remember some of my peers in California when I was like, hey, I'll write pleadings for you. Like, I'll manage your
Mhm.
clients. I'll do everything except show up in court. They were like, how is that going to work? And I'm like, the internet, man. Like,
You
you
are
know,
also part of Team Remote before remote was cool. I love
yeah,
it.
yeah. And so I did that for a while, but then I ended up at Department of Veterans Affairs. And to your point, that was the first time, it was the first time in an interview where I talked about being a military spouse proudly, and not just proudly, but how it helped me prepare for my role. I was an attorney at the Board of Veterans Appeals. So we would hear disability claims, GI Bill disputes, any benefit that is available through
Mhm.
VA could come up through that channel before going to an external court. And I was able to say, like, you should hire me over my civilian peers, because I know when my husband gets hurt, he doesn't go to the doctor because he doesn't want to get taken out of flight status. I know that he's not going to say when his shoulder hurts, when he's having vision problems. And so I can look in a veteran's claims file and understand and empathize in a way. I know what a DD 214 is. Like, I know a lot of these acronyms already that a civilian lawyer isn't going to know. And it gave me a leg up. And then being at VA, where obviously the mission is so great, you're supporting
Oh,
this
absolutely.
community and helping them access their benefits. Um, but I had a great boss who was a military spouse, attorney herself, who had been in my same position maybe 10, 20 years ago. Her husband had gotten orders to Germany. She went from like a GS 12 or 13 lawyer to a GS 5 office assistant, because that was the only thing she could get over there. And when she came back, she really she rebuilt her career in DC, and then she did amazing things at the board with remote work and flexibility, because she saw, how it benefited not just military spouses, but again, a lot of the attorneys that work there. And so I started working there in DC, but when we PCS back to San Diego, it was the first time I was able to keep a job. It was the first time I stayed in a job long enough to get a pay raise, to get a better title, and so I think those are things that sometimes we talk so much about the hiring part of it,
Mhm.
but that retention piece is so important as well, to not have to
Oh,
go on
yeah.
another job hunt following a PCS like, literally life changing.
Oh, absolutely. Because so many people that I've worked with, especially at Squared Away, have been like, I'm moving from Hawaii to Germany. Are you going to fire me? I'm like,
Yeah.
absolutely not. I'm just going to tell you, make sure you have a good Wi-Fi connection. Like, you're not going anywhere. And that stability piece is I feel like so many people take that stability for granted. It's literally not in our wheelhouse in a lot of ways as a military spouse, even when a deployment is not on a horizon, PCS isn't on the horizon, you still have no idea. And just having that across the board in so many different niches of careers is an absolute blow it out of the water moment for military families.
Yeah, it's so huge, and I wish more employers understood that. And it's unfortunate we're seeing a rollback now. I think I saw Starbucks just announced everyone has to come back into the office, which is, I think, just so short-sighted and unfortunate on both ends, for the companies that are going to lose a lot of great talent, and for the workers who are that talent and incredibly
Mhm.
capable and just need a little bit of flexibility. And so I felt really lucky when I did end up on Dr. Biden's team. I got loaned out from the VA to go work for her, which was an incredible opportunity. Um, which I appreciated, that she brought in folks who had that lived experience, right? And
Mhm.
I was able to sit in
Absolutely.
rooms with these policymakers who didn't always have that lived experience and say, hey, wait a minute, what about this? What about this?
Mhm.
And one of our biggest accomplishments was a June 2023 executive order on military veteran, caregiver, and survivor economic opportunity, which is like one of the proudest things I've ever done professionally. And it really centered on that. One, putting out a roadmap. There was no federal roadmap for military and veteran, connected family employment for veterans, and we have a lot of data on veterans in the federal government, but not on military spouses, even though we know that's a huge employer. And it makes a lot of sense. Like, you're right next to a base, there's a huge federal footprint. Um,
Yeah.
but really pushing on some of those things. One thing that was in that executive order that came from my personal experience was offering administrative leave during a PCS, because even though all those good things that I was talking about, that I was able to keep my job and take it with me and get promoted, and I was so grateful, I still had to take my own personal leave to be at the house for the movers, to receive the household goods on the other end. It sure wasn't him. He was off
Oh
flying
no.
or
Oh, it's
whatever.
never them. It's never them.
Yeah.
um, but and that's something that we implemented about 5 years ago was, you get 10 days for CONUS moves
So great.
and 15 days for OCONUS moves. And that doesn't come out of your stipend. Like, that is something you can't help in any capacity. It's like
Right.
and a hurricane. You can't help a hurricane coming through your backyard. So why would you basically hold it against someone because, oh, by the way, you have to be there for the movers to make sure they don't jack up all your stuff? Sorry. Shout out to all the good companies out there that have packed and moved us and might have to again in the future. Um, but it's hard. And I mean, that's a whole workday in and of itself. And it's the things that employers who don't have that experience, they're like, oh, well, you're just taking a day off to pack and dance around your house.
Right.
And I'm like, absolutely not. That is not even the way it works at all. And then you have to worry about, making sure all of your crates are good to go and things are signed and all that jazz. Literally, like, the grimy suck of being a military spouse is a PCS move.
Yeah.
And I wish more people understood that because you're literally having to rebuild your life in a very short time span and understand, even if you have kids, new schools, new daycares,
Yeah.
new doctors, new grocery stores, new vets for your pets, and moving a pet across the country is
Oh my
also a whole
gosh.
different ballgame.
Yeah.
We took our cat to and from Hawaii. Absolute
Oh,
nightmare. Um, but that's the things that people don't see because nobody really talks that much about it.
yeah.
So,
Yeah, it's like I would much rather be at work. The work during a PCS in some ways is the stability and the
yes.
continuity. And it's like I would much rather be working than dealing with, you know, the movers, like you said, the crates and all of the logistics that go into that. So that's so great that you do that. And especially, so many days we were just able to get five, which is, a start. But just little, some of the things seemed so little that were in the order, and some were bigger. Like I said, building this roadmap, doing a better job collecting data, so that we can track hiring and retention. Um, Trying to do a better job of supporting military spouses, which it sounds like you've also done, staying in their jobs even when they go overseas. Because
Hmm.
again, I think that's somewhere that the federal government could do a better job on, and have really been working hard to improve that program. Which just, it's like DoD, state, whatever agency is hiring the military spouse, it's a lot of moving parts. But we really thought we need to get our house in order as the federal government before we can go out and tell private sector employers, you need to be doing X, Y, and Z. Let's make sure we're doing everything we can, internally. And unfortunately, a lot of that is getting rolled back now, which is sad to see. But I still think, if we can make sure that when military spouses are hired, they have an opportunity to be retained and really build a career, and not just, oh, I'm in this job for the 2 years that I'm at that duty station. That's where we'll start to see really significant movement on the unemployment rate and some of the other numbers we know that are not that great right now.
Yeah, and I fully agree with you. It's an education of the employers. This is what a PCS looks like in a perfect world. A PCS would go great. You can offer XYZ because trust me, it's going to cost you less to retain this amazing employee than it is to go out, maybe hire somebody that isn't so great, retrain them when all you have to do is put something like a military spouse remote work policy. Like as long as you are active duty military spouse, and I'm just totally, shooting from the hip right now because I talk about this all the time. But if employers can see how someone's making it work, I think they would be more apt to say, hey, we can do this here. And it's actually not a really heavy lift for us.
Right. And there's some really great resources. I think I saw you work with Hiring Our Heroes,
Mhm.
with MSEP over at DoD. Like, there, to your point, there are companies doing it. There are companies doing it well. We've shown that it can be done, that it is possible, and it just takes a little bit of lift on that employer's end to implement the right policies and see that
Absolutely.
it's doable.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more, but I know I'm preaching to the choir right now.
We just need all
um,
the employers to listen to this, right?
Dear every employer in the U.S., please
Yeah.
implement a military spouse hiring policy and career trajectory. Much appreciated. Love Libby and Michelle. Um, um, so you've been in some pretty huge rooms. You've been in the White House, the VA, led the Military Spouse JD Network. What has been your most holy cow, I can't believe I get to do this moment of your career journey?
Yeah. Well, I think I just touched on it with the executive order. It was stemmed from years of work. I started on Dr. Biden's team in early 2021, shortly after they went to the White House. And she relaunched Joining Forces, which was originally started with Michelle Obama and Dr. Biden. Um, and she resurrected it when she came back and started with a listening tour. She went to um, oh my gosh, I can't, Whidbey Island. She went to 29 Palms. She went to some really, tough duty stations
Hmm.
and talked to military families about, childcare and why they were starting their own businesses instead of, finding a job, and what it was like to be an entrepreneur and what support they needed. And so really listened, and then came back, and spent the next few years working on a lot of those issues, sometimes in ways that weren't really, like this executive order is not like, I don't know, they're like sexy, or I don't know, it's like so nerdy and policy, but that's a lot of what we did, is like hosting these conversations where we brought in USDA to talk about hunger and
Hmm.
why some families are struggling to put food on the table, and the realities of what military pay is, and is it keeping up.
Oh, yeah.
Bringing in DOL, and just making sure that everybody was at the table. Again, to your point about like dear every employer, it was like, hey, every agency, you touch military families in some way. Child care is not just at DoD, right? And so, really trying to get the agencies to talk to each other and see where we could think about plugging in better support for
Hmm.
military and veteran families, and caregivers and survivors was also an important piece. Um, I am now divorced from my service member, but I also think about, divorce. I spent 20 years. This is like still my community and my people and my experience. And like, so intertwined, my personal and professional. And so what happens when you're no longer the spouse, whether
Hmm.
that's divorce, um, as a survivor, whatever that looks like. And so making sure that we cast a really wide net when we were talking about this community, because we know living the active duty spouse life, what those challenges are, but like once that divorce happens or the uniform comes off or whatever it might be, like those things don't just magically go away. The resume gaps are still there. All of those challenges continue to impact families. So this is a really long-winded answer to get to
You
the
know what? It is
executive.
completely fine because, you're speaking my love language right now. It's just hitting all the wickets of the insanity that it is to be a military spouse. And we have we have single moms who have been divorced. They're no longer with their duty member. We have moms who are on the civilian side who have the exact same struggles because they're first responder spouses, or their spouses
Yeah,
have a career that takes them away for weeks and months at a time. And I think that mindset is just, it's not just military spouses. You have to think this is all spouses in some capacity. And how do we support everybody? So casting that wide net across and just saying, you have to have a flexibility option as a
yeah,
company. Not everything is black and white. Pretty much every military spouse with that background is going to come in very gray. And you have to figure out, you know, is your team worth growing just because it doesn't fit in that box?
right.
And you're missing out on a lot of talent if you do that.
Yeah. Yeah, one of the areas I'm embarrassed to say I hadn't really fully grasped when we were working through this, and like I said, talking with these other agencies, especially as we worked through the executive order, which was, oof, even as a lawyer, I was like, this is really a test. Like you write one section, you send it to these lawyers, it comes back, then it goes to the agency lawyers, it comes back, it goes, oh my gosh,
I can only imagine the amount of red lines that went into this.
and then
Or
somebody would
the-
say, what about this? And I was like, oh, we can't, like, no, it's just going to set us back 6 months, to add like one line. But I hadn't really considered how State Department spouses deal with a lot of these same
Mhm.
things, and they don't have a lot of the support and resources that we necessarily have at DoD. And I think how challenging it still is for us at DoD with all of the resources that we have, And
Oh,
then
yeah.
think about, to your point, these first responder spouses or some of these other communities that are dealing with similar lifestyles and don't necessarily have all of these, um, these resources that help dampen the impact a little. So that was
Yeah.
a huge learning piece. But for me, the highlight was the day that we signed I think we signed, like I signed it, but the day that the president signed the executive order and it became official. We flew down to Fort Liberty at the time,
Yeah.
on Air Force One, which is like just
Oh, wow.
incredible to think that I was like, is this real life? It was also my last day on the job. Like I literally stayed on the job to get that thing seen through and signed off. So here it is, my last day. We're like flying down on Air Force One to Fort Liberty, but then seeing we had a bunch of spouses go up on stage with Dr. Biden and the president representing, we had a mom who I think had her like week old baby up there on stage with her. And we had a male spouse who was a business owner. And we had spouses who were federal employees and just really tried to represent that full community. And it was just so incredibly powerful to see them like go there to this huge installation, right, with a huge military
Mhm.
family population. The room was overflowing. I think we actually ended up having to cut off capacity because so many people wanted to come and be part of it. And to just see the effort that went into recognizing the need to support, economic stability for our families, in this community. It was so incredible. I literally don't think anybody could have a better last day on the
I was about to
job.
say you went out with a bang. Like
Yeah,
Air
yeah.
Force One, hanging out with all my people, doing just incredible things, and actually watching that go into effect. I mean, that is all the mic drops at the
Yeah.
same time.
I do think I got off easy in some ways though, because then it was like, okay, now everybody go back and now you have to implement this. So good luck to you. Call me if you need anything, but I'll be watching, I'll be taking a really long nap. I think I went to
Yes.
Italy for a week and then, let me know if you need anything.
No, there you go. Call me if you have questions. Moment.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, that I'm like, wow, you got to ride on an Air Force One. I have so many questions. Like, um,
I
so
got to call my parents from Air Force One. My mom did not answer, much to her chagrin to this day. Uh,
I was actually able to use a phone mom on the plane and not get in
yeah.
trouble. So thank you for not answering. Um, what's one issue? I mean, that's definitely a huge highlight of your career, but what's one issue that still kind of keeps you up at night, even after that whole experience?
Well, I think now, unfortunately, watching the dismantling of the federal workforce in so many ways it's gut wrenching as somebody who, believes in public service, just generally.
Hmm.
It's hard to watch, I think, for a lot of Americans. But having worked on this and knowing how many other people worked on this for decades to get to the point that we were at, um, it's really, really hard. And I don't want to say like not I don't feel like personally guilty, but it is hard watching folks who said, go get this job, like take this job. The federal employment is such a great opportunity. And then to watch people go through the job loss, or even right now, it's so some of it's not job loss yet. It's just this
Hmm.
uncertainty where it's like, you're gonna be fired. No, you're not. We don't know yet. We're still coming up with the plan. It's a lot of uncertainty for families that, as we've been talking about, already have so much upheaval in their lives. And I know there are people who are in the administration who are fighting to try to carve out, to protect veterans and military families in some of these cutbacks, which, I appreciate and think is needed. But uh, that to me is just, yeah, it's been a really tough few months watching that happen. And it's one of my practice areas, employment law. I have my own firm now where I do
Hmm.
mostly VA benefits, but also some federal employment. work. And so getting to, intimately know some of these folks and try to help with their cases has just been, like I said, really, really heartbreaking. But I am an optimist at heart. And so I like to end, I guess, when I talk to people on the note that I do think there will be an opportunity to rebuild. I think we are better as a country when we have a strong federal workforce doing these important things like, you know, telling us the weather. And
Mm-hmm.
for military families, U.S. aid and a lot of this peacekeeping work that keeps our loved ones in uniform from having to go overseas in harm's way. I think a lot of that work will be revived down the road. And so I think it's a really tough time for our community that's so interlinked with the federal workforce. I hope people will want to come back when the time comes. I think military spouses, like our service members, a lot of time we have a heart for service too. We want to do good things. Like, yes, we want a job and a career, but we want it to be meaningful. And that was the other piece of federal work, was that you got to do some really great things like at VA serving our community. So uh, it's hard to watch right now, but I have faith and hope in the future that we'll rebuild.
Same. It's been really hard to kind of watch things go very well for a while, and then it's like dynamite was just dropped on our community. And it's so weird how it impacts you in your daily life even when you're not a federal employee. Like, we live in North Carolina. Some of our very good friends are federal employees that were called back to Virginia, and their girls are actually my boys' is like some of their best friends. And they were like, well, why do they have to move back to Virginia? Her daddy works from home. And he goes, Mommy, are we going to have to move? Are you going to lose your job? I'm like, no, very different. But it impacts so many different areas of life that I think a lot of people are losing sight of long term.
Yeah. Well, and that's a great point, is that it's not just the firings, it's the rollback of remote work and remote
Mhm.
roles, which was again something we had really pushed for in the EO, to say, like, yeah, maybe a spouse is in this job, but when they PCS, they can continue doing it remotely. And how is that going to work now, under an administration that is, quite hostile, quite frankly, to remote work, unfortunately. And so, there are certain roles at VA. There's a lot of medical roles where, of
Mhm.
course, it doesn't make sense. When it does make sense. Like, I just have to hope that they will consider to, keep considering that flexibility, especially for military families. But haven't seen a lot of that lately, unfortunately.
This is when we start advocating and being the pain in the ass that we all can be as military spouses and advocates for our communities. So this is you guys' call to action from us today. But
Yeah,
I have
yeah.
I have one final question for you, and this is something that I've been asking all of my guests. What does reinvention mean for you?
Hmm. That is a really great question. And, as I alluded to, I am now divorced from my service member. And uh, that was so tough, as, this community, as we're talking about, is so all consuming
Mm-hmm.
in your life, right? It controls where you live,
Your
when you're
friend.
going to move, right? Who you associate with in many ways, what your job opportunities may and may not be, um, what retirement might look like and when. I mean, there's just so many implications. And so it was really tough for me to navigate that. And at first I was like, oh, I just, pushed myself away from the community. and had to take a little break. That's when I left the VA and went over to the DNC. I was like, I'm going to go be in politics now. Whatever. A new form of public
Segue.
service.
Here I go.
Right. And that was fine. It was great. But I had these military spouse friends. Like, my core group for the last decade were these military spouses, and a lot of them attorneys that we had been in the trenches with and fought these licensing battles with and had gone through PCSing and deployments and things that other friends just were never going to understand. And they're the ones that told me, like, once a military spouse, always a military spouse. Like, we're not losing you. You can still play, like, you're still part of this community. Nothing changes. Your ID card might change, but our friendships don't change, and your experiences don't change.
Right.
And now I'm remarried. I live overseas. Talk about reinventing yourself. It's like complete over here. And so it's like, yes, I reinvented myself and picked myself up. But I didn't lose myself either. I kept those pieces of me that, those friendships that meant so much. And so it's like, yeah, I reinvented myself and found my way, but I didn't completely lose myself in doing
Absolutely.
that.
Oh, man. Military spouse friendships are some of the greatest blessings in this lifestyle, and I wouldn't trade them for anything in the world. They're all a little bit crazy. Like, I think that's a requirement,
Yes.
but it's one of the most fantastic groups of
They
people.
send great care packages, and they deliver a lot of ice cream. That's the
exactly. Or in my case, I get a lot of wine from my girlies. So they're incredible. But thank you, Libby, for joining us. This has been so incredible to learn about your advocacy work and all the amazing things you've been doing for our community. So thank you so much for all that you've done. And I know there's lots of people that are going to be yelling, Libby's our new favorite. So you might have to come back and visit us sometime.
Anytime. I will just put in one plug to reiterate on what you said, which is call your representatives, call your senators, like, tell them your experiences. Yeah, I spent a short amount of time on the Hill. They do count those calls. So if, like, any of this resonated about the employment piece, and I'm sure it did, childcare, employment, like, call them and tell them that, please.
Yes. Make them your new best friends, or at least whoever is answering the phone, your new best friend.
Put them on speed dial. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Well, thank you again, Libby, so much. And thank you all for listening. And we will talk to y'all soon.